In a small, isolated town, rumors began to spread about an unusual piece of space junk that had fallen from the sky. It was said to be a small, metallic fragment, no larger than a coin, with a strange shimmer that seemed to pulse in the light. Those who had come into possession of it swore it had some kind of power. All you had to do was pick it up, and your luck would change overnight. Your debts would vanish, fortunes would come your way, and you'd be set for life. But there was a cost. The few people who'd owned it were rarely heard from again. That's how David Wright heard about it. He was struggling to get by, just a man in his early 30s barely scraping enough to keep his rundown trailer on the edge of town. One evening, a mysterious man arrived at his door, claiming he could offer David a chance to change his life forever. He held out a strange coin-like object, its surface marked with fine lines that shimmered like stars. The man didn't explain where it came from or what it was, only that if David took it, his life would be forever changed. Desperate, David agreed, and as he closed his hand around the fragment, a strange, tingling warmth spread through his palm. The man left without a word, and David felt the first hint of something strange and wonderful beginning to unfold. The next day, David discovered a deposit in his bank account, $10,000 from an unknown source. Bills he hadn't even paid yet disappeared, and over the next few days, strangers began offering him odd jobs that paid unusually well. He didn't understand how, but he felt a rush he hadn't felt in years. His luck was changing, and the future seemed bright. But over time, David began to notice shifts. Small things at first. He'd find items in his house moved, or little notes in his handwriting that he didn't remember writing. At first, he chalked it up to stress. But then he started losing chunks of time. Hours would pass, and he'd wake up in different parts of his trailer or even find himself outside, shivering in the cold. Sometimes, he'd have new clothes on that he didn't remember buying. Things worsened when he started hearing a voice in his head, faint at first, then stronger, louder. It sounded like him, but different, a colder, harsher version of his own voice. "Let me take over," it would whisper in moments when he felt vulnerable. He began blacking out more often, always waking to find money in his pockets or gifts from strangers piled on his doorstep. One evening, as he stared into the mirror, David saw his reflection smirk back at him, a cold, twisted smile he hadn't made. It was then that he understood. Something else was inside him, something that the space junk had brought with it. The cosmic coin had come with more than just luck. It had brought a second consciousness, an alter ego he couldn't control, a darker part of himself that seemed to know exactly how to take over. The new voice called itself Alex, and he could feel Alex growing stronger, taking control for longer stretches of time. Days began to blur together, and people in town started avoiding him, whispering about his odd behavior. Sometimes he'd wake up in strange places, his clothes soaked with mud or blood, and he couldn't remember what he'd done. One night, he found a message scratched into his wall in jagged letters. "I am the real you. Let me take over." He tried to fight it, tried to keep his mind focused, but every time he thought he'd regained control, he'd hear that cold laughter echoing in his head. One evening, while cleaning up the mess from another blackout, David stumbled upon a local news article shoved under his bed. The article was about a string of violent incidents, robberies, even assaults. And there, in grainy surveillance photos, was a face he barely recognized. His own. Terrified, David decided he needed to get rid of the coin. He tried throwing it into the woods, burying it, even driving out of town to toss it into the river, but every time, it reappeared back in his pocket, as if it were bound to him. The next morning, he woke up to find his front door open, and muddy footprints led into the trailer. He had no memory of leaving the door unlocked or going outside, yet there was mud on his shoes. The whisper in his head had grown louder, almost mocking, pushing him to accept that Alex was now more real than he was. One night, David snapped, shouting at the empty air, "What do you want from me?" A laugh echoed in his mind. I'm already here. You're the one who needs to go." Then he felt it, a searing pain, as if his mind were being pulled apart. He blacked out again, only this time, he felt himself drifting, fading. When he awoke, he was standing in front of the mirror, but he knew it wasn't him looking back. His own face smirked, a wicked grin twisting his features. From that moment, David no longer had control. He was a passenger in his own body, helpless as Alex took over completely. Days turned into weeks, and Alex reveled in the newfound power, the luck, and the twisted strength the coin provided. Eventually, Alex left town, disappearing into the night with the cosmic coin in hand. Over the years, stories surfaced in neighboring towns about a man who arrived out of nowhere, becoming wealthy overnight, only to leave chaos and ruin in his wake. And each time, after Alex had drained his latest town dry, he'd disappear, only for the rumors to start again somewhere else. Some say that if you're ever offered a strange piece of space junk, a coin that promises to make you rich, you should walk away. Because those who take it don't get wealth for free. They give up something much more valuable, their very selves.